My name is Grace, I'm 28 years old, and this is not just a story. It's a wound that turned into a scar, and a scar that became my greatest source of strength. What happened in my own family house still feels like a nightmare sometimes, but it was real. I survived it, and I want you to hear it straight from me. Before I begin, if you enjoy true story-style narratives filled with suspense, betrayal, and unforgettable revenge, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Now let me tell you what really happened. It started on a warm Saturday afternoon. The kind of afternoon where the house smelled like fried plantain and stew, where laughter from cousins filled the living room, and aunties bickered over who cooked the best jollof rice. I should have felt at home. Instead, I felt like an outsider watching a theater I had no role in. That day, I discovered something that left me breathless. Something I never thought my family, the people who raised me, could do. I had always been the responsible one, the quiet one who saved money instead of buying flashy clothes, the one who skipped outings to build a safety net for my future. Every month, after paying my bills, I'd put a portion of my salary aside. By 28, I had managed to save enough to cover a year's rent and still have a small cushion for emergencies. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. My lifeline. Or so I thought. That afternoon, I walked into the living room just as my mother and aunt were chatting. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments. Words like wedding, decorations, and money. Paused, holding my breath. Grace won't mind, my aunt was saying. She's family. After all, it's for her cousin's big day. It's not like she's using it for anything important. My heart skipped. What money? I asked, stepping into the room. The way they froze told me everything. My mother looked at my aunt looked at me, and then my mother sighed. Grace, please don't make it a big deal. We took some money from your savings for your cousin's wedding. It's family, and you know how important this celebration is. I felt my stomach drop. Some money, I repeated. How much? Her silence was louder than any answer. My aunt smiled nervously, waving her hand like it was nothing. Don't act like you're suffering. You're young, you can always save again. Think of it as your contribution to the wedding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother, the woman I trusted, had allowed them to raid my savings account. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, numb, as the walls of the house I once called home seemed to close in on me. Later that evening, when I confronted my father, he didn't even look guilty. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs and said, Grace, you're overreacting. It's family. Your cousin needed it. Besides, you live under this roof, eat our food. You should be glad to support. Support. That word echoed in my head like poison. I had been supporting everyone my entire life. Buying groceries when they were short. Paying electricity bills when the lights were about to be cut. Helping cousins with school fees. And now, when I finally tried to build something for myself, they took it without even asking. The worst part came a week later. My landlord called me, reminding me that rent was due. I went to my parents, hoping they'd at least acknowledge what they did and help me sort it out. Instead, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, Can't you borrow from your friends? You're young, you'll manage. Don't disturb us with rent issues. I laughed then, not out of humor but out of disbelief. Borrow? After they'd emptied my savings. Borrow? As if I hadn't been responsible enough to prepare for my rent. That was the moment something inside me snapped. That night I packed my bags quietly. I didn't slam doors. I didn't shout. I simply zipped up my suitcase, folded the life I had known, and walked out of the family house. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. It was as if I was already invisible to them. But as I dragged my suitcase down the street, tears streaming down my face, I made myself a promise. They will regret this. Not with anger. Not with violence, but with success so loud it will drown out every insult, every betrayal, every dismissal. They had taken my savings, but they would never take my determination. And that was the beginning of everything. The night I left the family house, I didn't have a plan. I had a suitcase, a few clothes, and a small amount of cash I'd hidden away in my purse. That was all. My savings, the money I thought would carry me through, was gone, swallowed by flowers, dresses, and catering bills for a wedding that wasn't even mine. I walked until my feet hurt. I couldn't go to any of my friends. Most of them already had their own struggles, and I didn't want to burden them. By midnight, I ended up at a cheap guest house in a noisy part of town. The neon lights flickered above me as I handed over cash for a room that smelled of damp walls and stale cigarettes. Lying on that creaky bed, staring at the ceiling, reality hit me hard. I was homeless. The following days blurred into one another. I woke up every morning with determination burning in my chest, but the weight of despair clung to me like sweat. I pounded the streets with my CV, knocking on doors, begging for opportunities. Some offices turned me away before I could even explain myself. Others smiled politely, promising to keep my CV on file, which was just another way of saying no. At night, I returned to my tiny guest house, counting every coin, knowing my money was running out. I skipped meals to make it last longer, drinking water to fill the hollow ache in my stomach. But I refused to call home. Every time I was tempted, I remembered my mother's cold words. "Can't you borrow for your rent?" The memory stabbed me like a knife, hardening my resolve. No, I would not crawl back. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me beg. Then came the lowest point. One afternoon, after another failed job hunt, I sat in the corner of a park, exhausted. My shoes were worn, my hair messy, my clothes wrinkled from wearing them over and over. A group of young men passed by, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at me and said, "Look at that girl, she must have done something bad to end up like that." They laughed and walked away, but I sat there frozen, shame burning my cheeks. It wasn't just about being broke anymore. It was about dignity, and mine was slipping away. That night, in the darkness of my guest house room, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. I cried for the betrayal, for the humiliation, for the loneliness. But somewhere between the sobs, a new fire lit inside me. If my own family could throw me away, then I had nothing left to lose. And with nothing left to lose, I had everything to gain. The next morning I woke up different. Tired, yes, but sharper. Stronger. Instead of wandering aimlessly with my CV, I started thinking strategically. What skills did I have? What could I offer? I remembered how I used to help out at small businesses, managing books, handling customers, even doing bits of social media promotion. I wasn't a genius, but I was resourceful. I walked into a small printing shop that was struggling to stay afloat. The owner, a middle-aged man with worry lines etched deep into his face, barely looked at me when I introduced myself. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to work," I said. "You don't even have to pay me much at first. Let me show you how I can bring more customers to your shop." He laughed, shaking his head. "Young lady, I can't even pay my rent. How can I pay you?" "Then don't pay me," I insisted. "Let me prove myself. If I succeed, then we'll talk." That was how it began. I spent my days handing out flyers, posting pictures of the shop's products online, talking to people in the neighborhood, convincing them to come in. Slowly business picked up. People liked my energy, my persistence. Within weeks, the owner had more customers than he'd seen in months. One evening he handed me an envelope. "Take this. It's not much, but you've earned it." When I opened it, I found the equivalent of 2 months of my guest house rent. I almost cried right there in front of him. It wasn't just money, it was validation. Proof that I wasn't useless. Proof that I could stand on my own. From there, my hustle only grew. I picked up small freelance jobs, helping other small shops with promotions, keeping accounts, even writing little ads. I worked late into the night, slept little, and ate sparingly, but every coin I earned felt like a victory. Bit by bit, I built my life from scratch. And every step of the way, I kept thinking of my family. The people who had drained my savings, called me ungrateful, and told me to borrow for rent. I wondered if they missed me. I wondered if they ever thought of what they'd done. But mostly, I wondered how they would react when they saw me again, when they realized the girl they had dismissed was no longer at their mercy. Because deep down I knew one thing. My story wasn't going to end with me in a shabby guest house, broke and forgotten. My story was only just beginning. The small printing shop was never meant to be permanent. It was a stepping stone, a place where I learned that I wasn't broken, that my worth didn't depend on my family's approval. But as weeks turned into months, I realized something powerful. I was good at creating opportunities out of nothing. One evening after closing the shop, the owner patted my shoulder. "Grace, you have a gift," he said quietly. "The way you talk to people, the way you bring business. You could run your own company one day." I laughed, shaking my head. "A company? Me? I barely pay my rent." He looked me straight in the eyes. "Mark my words. One day you won't just survive. You'll build something bigger than all of this." His words stuck with me like glue. By then I had started saving again. It wasn't much, just small bills and coins tucked into an old tin box under my bed. But every time I opened that box, I felt a surge of pride. Nobody could take this from me. Nobody. One morning I decided to expand my side hustle. Instead of waiting for jobs to come, I went looking. I walked into small boutiques, salons, and eateries, introducing myself with a smile and a simple pitch. "Let me help you bring in more customers." Some laughed me off. Others ignored me. But just a few gave me a chance. I designed flyers, ran little social media pages, even came up with catchy slogans. It wasn't glamorous work, but word spread fast. "There's a girl who can boost your sales for cheap." And just like that, I became busy. I'll never forget one particular client, a small bakery owned by a young couple. They were kind but tired. Their business was barely surviving, and they were weeks away from shutting down. "Grace," the wife said, her voice trembling, "if you can't help us, we'll have to close. We've already sold some of our furniture just to keep the oven running." I threw myself into their project like it was my own. I spent long nights photographing bread and cakes under cheap lighting, making them look like luxury items. I handed out free samples on the streets, talking to strangers with a smile that sometimes felt forced but worked anyway. Within 2 months, their bakery was thriving. People lined up outside in the mornings. The couple was overjoyed, and for the first time they paid me more than I asked. That payment was more than just money. It was a revelation. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was growing. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One afternoon, I ran into my cousin at a busy market. Yes, the very same cousin whose wedding had swallowed my savings whole. She was dressed elegantly, her hair and nails perfectly done, carrying shopping bags like she owned the world. When her eyes landed on me, her lips curled into a smirk. "Grace," she said, her tone dripping with mock surprise. "Is this where you shop now? Oh, how things have changed." I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her that my hard-earned savings had paid for her fancy gown and her lavish party. But instead I just smiled, keeping my anger locked deep inside. As she walked away, I whispered to myself, "One day you'll see me. And you'll regret everything." That moment sealed something in me. I wasn't just hustling for survival anymore. I was hustling for revenge. Quiet, patient revenge. The true turning point came one evening when I attended a small networking event. I hadn't planned on going. I almost skipped it because I felt too tired, too underdressed, too ordinary to belong in a room full of professionals. But something told me to show up anyway. The event was held in a modest hotel conference room. People were exchanging business cards, sipping drinks, laughing in small circles. I stood in the corner at first, nervous. Then, forcing myself forward, I introduced myself to a group of young entrepreneurs. When I explained what I did, helping small businesses grow with simple, creative strategies, they looked intrigued. One man in particular leaned closer. "That's impressive," he said. "We're launching a small tech startup. We could use someone like you to help with branding and marketing." Froze. A startup? That sounded like a whole new level. But I smiled and said the words that changed everything. "I'd be happy to help." Working with that startup was a game changer. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, endless meetings, and moments when I doubted myself. But I poured my heart into it. I created campaigns, managed their presence online, and connected them with clients they never thought they'd reach. Within months, their small idea blossomed into something real. Investors started paying attention. And with every milestone, they credited me as part of the engine driving their growth. For the first time, I wasn't just a girl hustling in the shadows. I was becoming someone people noticed. And deep down I knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Once I started working with that tech startup, my life shifted. No more guest house rooms with peeling paint. No more counting coins for food. I still lived modestly, but my days had purpose. I was learning, networking, and watching myself evolve. The startup wasn't paying me much at first, but the connections I made were priceless. Every meeting introduced me to someone new. Someone who needed help branding their business, someone who wanted strategies to reach customers. My name spread like a whisper through the city's small business circles. She's young, but she's smart. She's the girl who helped that bakery. She's the one who turned a struggling shop into a thriving business. Soon I wasn't knocking on doors anymore. Doors were opening for me. One day, while leaving a cafe after a meeting, a woman in her 40s stopped me. She looked polished, the type who carried herself with confidence. "Are you Grace?" she asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. She smiled. "I've heard about you. I run a mid-sized clothing line, and business has been stagnant. I'd like to know if you can work some of your magic." I laughed nervously, but we exchanged contacts. That job turned into one of the biggest contracts I'd ever had at the time. I rebranded her business from scratch. New logo, better online presence, creative campaigns. Within 6 months, her sales doubled. She paid me generously, and for the first time I moved into a proper apartment. A small one-bedroom, but clean, safe, and mine. I stood in that empty apartment the day I moved in, staring at the keys in my hand, and whispered, "This is the beginning." From then on, everything snowballed. More businesses called. More referrals came in. I no longer worked just for survival. I was building an empire. One late night, I sat at my little desk, surrounded by papers, receipts, and a buzzing laptop. My bank account wasn't overflowing yet, but it was stable, growing. I looked at the numbers and smiled for the first time in years. But my thoughts always drifted back to my family. Did they know what I was doing? Did they care? I hadn't heard from them since I walked out. Not a call, not a message, not even a "how are you?" They had written me off completely. That silence hurt. But it also fueled me. The real breakthrough came 2 years later. The tech startup I'd helped in the beginning reached out again, this time with an offer. They had grown big, secured investments, and now they wanted me on board as their full-time marketing director. "Grace," the CEO told me, "you've been part of our journey from day one. We don't just want you as a consultant anymore. We want you as part of the team." I was stunned. Me, a director. Just a few years ago, I was sleeping in a guest house, broke and humiliated. Accepted. That role changed everything. My salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of. I traveled for conferences, networked with international clients, and managed teams of people. My world expanded in ways I never thought possible. I was no longer just the girl who hustled. I was Grace, a rising star in the business world. But fate wasn't done writing my story. At a major industry event, I met a group of investors looking for fresh ideas. Over dinner, I shared my vision of creating a consultancy firm, a company dedicated to helping small and mid-sized businesses grow, just like I had done for years. One of them leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You've got passion. And more importantly, you've got results. If you're serious, we'd like to back you." My heart nearly stopped. Investors. For my company. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying their words, imagining the possibilities. Within months, with their support, I launched my own consultancy firm. A real business with an office, employees, and clients lined up. I had become the CEO. I'll never forget the day I walked into that office for the first time. The glass doors gleamed, the company logo shone on the wall, and my small team greeted me with smiles and respect. For a moment I stood still, overwhelmed. Then I whispered to myself. They used my savings. They mocked me. They threw me out. But look at me now. It wasn't just success. It was vindication. And I knew the day was coming. The day my family would see who I had become, and regret every word, every action. It was a bright Saturday morning when it happened. I had just finished a strategy meeting with my team and was preparing to head home when my phone buzzed. The caller ID froze me. It was my mother. For a moment I just stared at the screen. My heart raced, my palms grew sweaty. After all these years of silence, why now? Answered. Hello. Her voice was shaky. Grace, it's me. We need to talk. Please come home. That word felt foreign, almost bitter. But curiosity tugged at me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Walking into the family house after years was like stepping into a place I once knew but no longer belonged to. The walls, the furniture, even the smell of the old rugs, it was all the same. Yet I was different. My brother and cousin were there too, along with my father, sitting in tense silence. My mother's eyes watered when she saw me. Grace, she began, we made mistakes. We didn't treat you fairly. We were cruel. But we need your help now. I folded my arms. Help. After everything you did. My father cleared his throat, his pride barely holding. Your cousin's husband, he left. Their business collapsed. And your brother is struggling. We're drowning in debt. Grace, you're the only one who can save us. The irony almost made me laugh. Years ago, they had drained my savings for that same cousin's wedding, mocking me when I struggled to pay my own rent. And now, here they were, eyes full of desperation, voices trembling. I didn't speak right away. I just sat there letting the silence stretch. My cousin shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasped tightly. My brother, who had once called me useless, couldn't even look at me. Finally I smiled faintly. Do you remember the day you told me to borrow for my rent? Do you remember calling me ungrateful, useless, a disgrace? No one replied. The shame in their silence was louder than any words. I stood pulling my car keys from my bag. I have built my own life. I'm not here to fix yours. My cousin gasped. Grace, please, we're family. I turned to her, my voice calm but sharp. Family doesn't use you. Family doesn't steal from you and throw you away. Family doesn't only remember you when they're desperate. Her eyes filled with tears. My brother finally looked up, his face pale. Grace. Sorry. I was wrong. For a moment, I saw the boy I had once cared for, the brother I'd sacrificed for. But the memory of his cruel words on the day I left burned too deep. I shook my head. Sorry doesn't erase years of pain. Sorry doesn't give me back the nights I cried alone. Sorry doesn't rebuild the trust you destroyed. I walked out of that house slowly, deliberately, their desperate voices trailing behind me. As I reached my car, I saw neighbors peeking from across the street, whispering. They had seen me return, not as the broken, penniless girl they remembered, but as a woman who carried herself with strength, stepping into a sleek car that screamed of success. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away. For the first time in years I felt truly free. A week later, I received a letter from my cousin. Pages of apologies, begging for forgiveness. She wrote about sleepless nights, about regret eating her alive. My brother called too, crying, admitting that he had never thought I would rise so high while he remained stuck. Did their words heal me? Not entirely. But they were proof. Proof that I had won without even trying to. Proof that walking away had been the greatest revenge. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to take revenge in petty ways. My success had spoken louder than any insult, louder than any slap. Today, when I walk into my office as CEO, I don't just see walls and desks. I see every tear I shed in that guest house. I see every rejection, every hungry night, every cruel word. And I smile because all of it led me here. They gave me pain and I turned it into power. They gave me betrayal and I turned it into strength. And in the end, they came back with premium apologies, while I walked away with something far greater. Dignity, peace, and success that no one could ever take away. Sitting in my office one evening, long after my team had gone home, I looked out at the city skyline glowing against the night. The roads below were busy, people rushing, chasing dreams, or just struggling to survive like I once did. I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who handed over her savings out of love, who was told to borrow for her rent, who cried in a dingy guest house with no one to lean on. That version of me felt so far away, yet she was still here, inside me, reminding me of where I came from. My family had once called me useless. They thought I would remain broken. But every cruel word, every betrayal, every slap of humiliation had only carved me into someone stronger. The revenge wasn't in shouting at them, or throwing my success in their faces. The revenge was in living fully, thriving, becoming the person they never believed I could be. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Sometimes the people closest to you will hurt you the most. Sometimes they'll drain your kindness and mock your pain. But you can choose what to do with that pain. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it build you. Chose to build. And in the end, I didn't just build wealth or status. I built dignity, independence, and a life where my worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval. When I think back to the day I walked out of that family house, I realize it was the beginning of my freedom. They thought they had thrown me away. But in truth, they had set me free to become the woman I was meant to be. Now, when I see their faces filled with regret, when I hear their apologies, I don't feel bitterness anymore. Feel closure. Because the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's success, peace, and knowing you don't need their validation anymore. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever been told you're useless, remember my story. Remember Grace, the girl they dismissed, the woman who rose. Your pain can be your weapon. Your silence can be your strength. And your success can be your sweetest revenge.